It always comes to this. Hello there, guys. Here to do a different video today. Not a tattoo progress update video. I did have 3 sessions last week, and I just had a session now. I won't be talking about that in this video, but that video will be coming up shortly. Today I wanted to talk about the fact that the Guinness Book of World Records has recently reached out to me, or at least some automated service through Guinness Book has reached out to me. It's hard to tell how much of these things are automated or even approved by a human in this day and age. So much of our websites and the way they're operated is AI these days, but something must have happened within Guinness, as they sent me an email basically explaining that my application has been reopened. I did not ask them to reopen it, and I have no general interest in them reopening it. So something had to have happened internally. Maybe it's because I've been calling them out, not necessarily purposely for this reason, but I've been telling the story on all my social media whenever it's broached upon, you know, and this is something that happens more and more daily without prompt, without any initiation on my end. People are just casually kind of going, "You got to be the world record holder for most tattoo hours, Remy, or most tattoos ever, Remy," something to this effect. Like, it just has to be the case. I wanted to make a whole video on this topic because it quite frankly, it deserves the it deserves the video. But I am asked this every day. People are always asking me if I have any world records, and the short answer is yes, absolutely. They're guaranteed, like without a doubt. And anywhere from 1 to 50, depending on how, you know, in depth you want to get with this. You know, individual things can be as many as, you know, I've had most sessions on my head. I've had the most sessions in my armpit, most sessions on my ribs, most sessions on my stomach, most sessions on my arms, most sessions on my hands. All of these things, I have no doubt, are all world records. Most sessions on my neck, you know, all of these things. I think I have the biggest stretched helix in the world. Now, Daiko Kaido Nero has, he has a bigger helix, but it's punched. There's all kinds of little records, and based on the silly records that they actually have in that book, I think all of those are fairly legit as well. There are dumber ones for sure, like how many people really care about the record of who has the most skull tattoos or who has the most insect tattoos. So, not to take away, like, those are perfectly valid, but if those are valid, all of those things that I just listed are as valid or more, because they're harder to do, right? It's a lot more labor to do that. What isn't a lot of labor is, from my point of view, and not to discredit what the current record holder has done, but from my point of view, thinking of the amount of time that I've spent tattooed, doing the bare minimum to cover the few spots of my body that have negative space remaining would take very little effort. I could do that inside of a single day. And this month alone, I have had over 50 hours of tattoos. So I want you guys to understand that the amount of negative space that I have left would not take me as long as I commit to being tattooed within a month, any given month. So it is very obviously a choice that I've chosen not to, for example, fully tattoo my face, despite immense social pressure from within this community to do so. And I mean immense, from both people who know nothing about this to people who know everything about this. I've had some of the deeply involved, full body suit people who do have face tattoos look at me as if I'm like some of them have looked at me as if I'm like a hipster or like a non-committal or like appropriating the culture because I refuse to kind of dive in full like they have, or like I don't really want to be a fully tattooed person or something because I've refused to fully tattoo my face. And the answer to that is kind of yeah, like I'm wearing these tattoos, they aren't wearing me, right? And for the purposes of having the title of Guinness Book of World Records most tattooed man, all it would really take for me is 10 to 15 hours of work. And no matter how hard you want to make those hours, because some people say, oh, well, you don't even know, you haven't had your nose tattooed yet. I gotta tell you guys, I could sit through my nose tattoo. I could sit through that. There's nothing left that I have to prove at this point to anyone. And it is very clear to anyone paying any amount of attention to this that the reason why I don't have a full face tattoo is very fucking clear. I have chosen not to do so. It would take no time at all for me to simply black out the rest of my face. And then for some reason, and do a very shoddy pass over my palms, shoddy pass over the remaining space on my soles. Those are the things that are keeping me from having that title. Now, I want to get into what they said in particular when they opened the application, and I'll put it in here. They opened this of their own volition with no prompt, because I've moved on from this. This happened back in September of last year, where they finally, after 2 years, responded to my application, and they said something to the effect of they could not verify the amount of layers that I had or variations on my bodysuit in reference to a record. Basically, in so many words, they couldn't confirm that it was all the same person or how many layers had taken place, despite mounds of documentation through video and photo. They could not confirm that all of that was the same person for the purposes of a record. And they weren't considering new records for hours or layers, which is even more absurd given what I already said about people having records for most insect and bug and fucking bones and skull tattoos on them and things like this. So they have absurd, inconsequential records in their books, but they aren't considering one for this particular record, which is by far more, I would think, more relevant to tattooing, especially given how many people just assume that I am the world's most tattooed person. I remember having a conversation with Lily Lou, one of the podcasts that didn't air, unfortunately. The last one we did was to go up on Lily Lou's channel, and we discussed, it was one of the topics that Lily Lou brought up, because Lily Lou has had this same quandary about whether they were the most tattooed person in the world, and they had thought about applying for the record as well. So Lily Lou brought it up because Lily Lou knows about my layers and how many times I've been tattooed and all this stuff. And this was a year ago, by the way, and it was already like a very well-known thing then. And Lily Lou more or less admitted that it was probably me that had the most time under the needle, and there was probably no good argument against it. However, we discussed how the body of work would be measured, with regards to Lucky Diamond Rich or Lily Lou, where both have more of their body tattooed, some of the inside of their body tattooed, organs, things like this, inside of the mouth. And should that matter? And I think it should matter for something. What I think is important to note, though, is that those things don't add up to much time. Now, that's not to take away the importance of those things being done. And I think it's cool that people have tried that stuff, but it's a completely different thing from what I'm doing. And so what I would say is that not only should they consider new records, they should consider having the person who legitimately has the most tattoo time in their book. And it makes them look increasingly more irrelevant to people who know what the fuck is going on in this. Especially given that one of the the most tattooed female that they just put in, and not to take away from what they've done again, but there's negative space through a lot of that person's designs. And for a person like myself who has almost no negative space, it seems to me strange that that can be counted as tattooed space. Even though it is quite intentionally negative, part of a tattoo, if my face is very intentionally not tattooed and doesn't count, that should count towards a total percentage that they don't have as well. These are all just stupid things, and I shouldn't even have to be thinking this way. I've more or less taken a pass on ever being in that book, and because I'm not going to have a full face tattoo, despite what a lot of people who pay zero attention to what I say, or people just assume that I'm going to do things that I haven't said, or, you know, I've made it very clear that that's not going to happen, and so if that's the criteria to be the world record holder for in any capacity for them, then that's probably never going to happen. So when they reopened the application, I kind of scoffed at it, and I think it would be more for them than me. And what they wanted was for me to have documentation from a medical practitioner or doctor declaring the percent of my body that's tattooed. So, and if I had to take a stab in the dark at it, it's probably something like 95%, maybe 96. So it's a high percent, but it's been the same percent for over a decade. This is what these half-wits are not understanding or getting through their heads. And like, I could very easily close that percentage very quickly if it was something that I really felt like doing. It would take almost no effort. But that little bit of effort would make a huge difference to my lived experience. Not for fear of judgment from others, but because I don't want to do that myself. It's important to respect your own boundaries, right? And so I would have to cross my boundaries to get into their idea of the world record holder. Has to be 100% covered skin. They don't care about the complexity of the design. They don't care about the amount of time it took to get there, the amount of sessions. They don't care about anything real that goes into this. And anyone that knows anything about tattoos will tell you, like, certain styles of tattoos to begin with take longer to do. All of these things are not graded for, and they don't give a fuck about any of the nuance. And so it's never going to make sense to them the way that it would to anyone who pays any amount of attention to tattoos. For example, like, I just had an 8-hour session on my leg, right? It would have taken an hour to do as much black work in that time, right? Or in that same area. So for them, though, that's still the same amount of coverage. So it doesn't matter, right? They're just grading on coverage. So, for example, you could theoretically have a guy with a 110-hour bodysuit. Let's say they go to a really fast black worker. It can be even less than that. Let's say they did it in about 100 hours. That seems reasonable for straight up black work from a badass. Maybe they could even do it quicker than that. Now, then you could have someone who has a multi-layer bodysuit project like I have, where some parts of them have been tattooed 30 times, and they still don't have the full face tattoo, but they have around 3,000 times as much hours, or 300% the time. Say that person took 100 hours, mine took 3,000. For Guinness, that person is still technically more tattooed. That's stupid. And so for me, I've given up the idea based on their criteria because I respect my boundary, right? I'm not going to be pushed by external things. I've had this pressure on me from within the community and from casual people, like, when are you going to tattoo your face? It's never a question of will you or why haven't you? It's always, when are you going to do it, as if I haven't gotten to it yet. If you haven't gotten to it yet after having completed multiple variations of a bodysuit, up to 30 layers in some areas, and even on my face, some of this is 10 layers. I want you guys to understand that my face has more work in it in layering and different variations than most people's full face tattoos took. So even though there is less of it tattooed, that doesn't speak to the complexity or the layering of the designs here. You know, this was a dagger, a rose, these were stars, bats, you know. This forehead peak has been extended 3 times. My chin all of this stuff has been brought up in complex ways several times and then layered over for different colors and effects. None of that stuff is ever going to matter to their ranking system. And so the only way that I could get in that spot is if I crossed my line to satisfy their very shallow criteria. What I would prefer to do is to continue to mock their system of their categorization of who is and what counts towards being the most tattooed person, because what I aim to achieve, and I don't care if I do or not, I would like to be in there for the credit of doing the most, the actual most layers and hours of tattooing, rather than having a 2-hour face blackout and an hour palm blackout, because they don't care about the quality or the saturation point of these things either. You want to go look at Lucky Diamond Rich's palms and tell me how saturated those are. These things were done for the specific purpose of being a record holder, and the only way that I could achieve the same is if I crossed my own line to do so. And to me, that's pretty fucking stupid to care so much about that you would do something that you have no interest in just for the purposes of a record. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to leave it there. I wanted to address this. I didn't want to get too angry about it. It is annoying as fuck. But as far as I know, I will never be in the record book. And I'm making my peace with that, whether they opened my application again or not. And that's going to be that.